At long last, we've reached the end of the road. It's Telltale's Walking Dead Season 4 characters.
Anyone else remember when Telltale legit closed down in the middle of the episodes being released? This season almost went unfinished.
That had me pressed to think we'd almost missed out on the conclusion to Clementine's story.
Well, thankfully, things worked out in the end. Our first character is Willie.
On one hand, Willie is a pretty cool little guy. He comes off as a goofball, but he is not one to be f***ed with. Bro legit crafts a bomb that he successfully uses to destroy the Delta ship.
Yeah, and Willie uses his other hand to choke the chicken.
Bro, Donald, the kid is like 12 years old.
I didn't make this up. Willie was sent to Erickson for, and I quote, chronic masturbation, which is doubly odd because by this point we're 8 years into the apocalypse, which means Willie got started at like 4 years old or something.
Yeah, I think I could do without the knowledge of this kid's awakening when the only thing he should have been playing with is some Legos.
Wait, did his parents name him Willie before or after he started beating?
Moving on. Willie takes the whole survival thing pretty seriously, well, as seriously as you can expect from a kid. He is the main lookout and lets the rest of the students know if walkers are showing up. He also has little tolerance for people who screw up the plan, shown when he gets angry at Tennessee for getting Mitch killed.
I respect the kid for that. The last thing anyone needs is another Ben, Sarah, or Gabe. Unfortunately, Telltale is hell-bent on introducing these types of characters in every season to screw everything up.
I can already tell there's going to be a debate over Tennessee.
We'll get to it when we need to. For now, I say we put Willie in B tier. He's a pretty enjoyable character, setting aside his habits.
B-tier character on the basis that Willie is actually a funny little dude?
Good, now we have a Sim, a pretty calm and practical young guy who apparently has a crush on Ruby.
A Sim is the kind of guy you want in the group. He keeps track of things that go right and wrong in his journal, so you don't repeat mistakes. And he always has a backup plan.
I find him boring, but at the same time, he's one of the people who vote in favor of Clementine and AJ staying at the school after Marlon is killed, so he can't be all bad, I suppose.
Naturally, a Sim is a pragmatic guy. He wants Clem around because he recognizes her as a true survivor who would make the school safe.
One side note about a Sim is that he apparently was sent to Erickson because he likes to play with fire.
Bro is a pyromaniac and has a crush on the fiery redhead member of the group.
Gotta give a Sim some points for pulling Ruby at the end of the season as well.
A Sim is a pretty basic character, but he has good moments and is inoffensive. So I say we stick him up there in C tier as well. Now we move on to Ruby, who was sent to Erickson for anger issues, despite the fact that she turns out to be the medic of the group.
Unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of content with Ruby. Early on, she gets bit by AJ and is understandably upset over it. And she seems to stress having good manners at the dinner table.
A little background on Ruby is she apparently had a close relationship with the school nurse, who was the only adult to stay with the kids when the apocalypse started. Naturally, Ruby is distraught when they find Ms. Martin's walker body in the greenhouse.
Ruby goes in C tier, nothing wrong with her, but she comes off as a more background character for most of the season, barely taking part in any of the big operations.
Time for the goat of the season. It's Chef Omar.
Listen, there's a surefire way into my heart, and it's to make food.
Unfortunately, Omar is literally the least important character in any of the major protagonist groups we've seen thus far. Even Sarah and Duck have more voice lines than him. Omar exists to get shot and then leave everything to the actual combatants of the Erickson kids, which I guess he should be happy about since he's guaranteed to live.
Omar deserves C tier on the basis that he cooks. I don't care if he does nothing else.
That's valid, Donald. Food is food.
Now it's time for our good old girl, Rosie.
Let me tell you something. Rosie clears the majority of the human characters in this entire series, and it's not even close.
The one good thing that Snake Marlin did was turn Rosie into an efficient walker killing machine. Look at her, she's built like a small weapon of war.
Seriously, what the hell are they feeding this girl for her to be built like that?
And despite being a killer, Rosie is the sweetest dog you'll ever meet. When Clementine is afraid of her due to her previous experience with Sam the dog, Rosie displays that she's a well-behaved pup.
Rosie protects the kids and attacks anything that harms them, be it a walker or a person.
Medium key, I want to put Rosie up in S tier. I'm not even joking.
Do it! Rosie is more than just a random animal. She's a full-blown part of the team and deserves a ranking that represents that.
Based, Rosie goes in S tier. The next character is Mitch. He appears to be the guy responsible for the upkeep and crafting of weapons, which makes sense. The guy was sent to Erickson for blowing things up.
Despite claims of being a good fighter, Mitch gets taken out early in the season because he has to save Tennessee.
The totality of Mitch's character is that he's the most hostile to Clem and AJ and comes off as an asshole. And to be fair, he is one. However, he steps up to take care of Willie at the start of the apocalypse. and he rushes in to save 10 even at the cost of his life, so he can't be all bad.
Mitch is lucky that episode 2 gave him more development. Thanks to that, we'll put him in C tier. Next up is Brody.
Brody is Marlon's second in command, which certainly explains why she had a part to play in the trading of Tennessee's sisters to Delta.
Brody seems to be a kid who suffered from extreme stress or anxiety. Girl starts swearing like a sailor when she finds out Clementine had a run-in with Abel.
When Brody and Marlon are having an argument over giving Clem and AJ to Delta, she is unfortunately killed when Mitch loses control of his anger. And naturally, Clementine is forced to take her Walker version out.
Ranking a character like this is rough. Brody isn't the worst character in the series, but she did trade 2 other kids to a bunch of warmongers. However, trading those 2 girls was the only way to buy time for the rest of the kids. It's a tough position to be in for a girl whose brain hasn't even finished developing yet.
Put Brody in C tier. She's not even alive long enough to leave an impact.
The only thing I really remember is that her death was pretty gruesome.
Moving on, we have the leader of the Erickson kids, Marlon.
Bro deserves the fattest F tier, traded Minerva and Sophie to Delta, tried to do the same to Clementine and AJ, killed Brody, and then tried to pin the whole thing on Clem.
Trying to trade Clem and AJ is definitely an L. But like your boy Barack already said, the whole thing with the twins was a tough call.
In Marlon's defense, his entire motivation was doing whatever it took to keep the other kids at Erickson safe from harm. However, the pressures of leadership broke him, and it resulted in him going too far in his goal to preserve peace and safety. Besides, Marlon is genuinely remorseful when the truth comes out and totally surrenders himself to the punishment the rest of the group gives him.
Or he would if AJ hadn't hit the most devious headshot you've seen in your life.
Okay, as bad as Marlon was, I don't think he deserved to die.
They did a good job building this character up in like 2 hours of game time. He gets C tier in my book.
It's almost a waste Marlon didn't live longer.
Now we've got Tennessee, also known as 10, a younger kid who is the brother of Sophie and Minerva.
Hate this whiny little brat so goddamn much. What the hell does he even do for the group besides draw?
Donald, he's a kid.
They're all kids, Joe. There's no excuse for any of them to not be pulling their weight. And 10 has to be about the biggest screw up in the series. At least Sarah was too nervous to act on her own. 10 over here lets himself get tricked by Lilly in episode 2, screwing up the plan and getting Mitch killed.
Careful there, Donald. I don't think AJ is going to appreciate you coming after his boy 10 like that.
I'm not afraid of that ankle biter. 10 doesn't even learn his lesson either. In episode 3, he has Lilly at gunpoint acting like he's about to do something, and he legit just lets her take the gun out his hands. Then when it seems like everything is settled, this little rugrat decides he wants to go wandering towards his dying sister when she's surrounded by walkers, which potentially gets Violet or Louis killed.
I don't necessarily dislike 10, but Donald brings up some valid points. 10's biggest flaw is that he's an idealist who believes people can't be fully evil. He's told that Lilly is lying to him in episode 2, but he falls right into the palm of her hand.
That stems from the boy's optimistic viewpoint that there is an afterlife and that the era of walkers will eventually come to an end.
There's a limit. The kid doesn't learn his lesson until after multiple people have potentially died because of his choices. Mitch, potentially James, and Violet or Louis. He is directly on par with Ben for the amount of damage done. I said Ben should have gone in F tier, and I think 10 should go in F tier too. I don't care that he's like 8 years younger.
We're not putting him in F tier. He's a reasonably well-written character and easily the nicest kid at the school, having voted to keep AJ and Clementine around. Plus, as much of a coward as he is, 10 still urges AJ to kill Lilly in episode 3.
Yeah, big talk from the boy who couldn't do it himself when he had the chance.
In the end, if 10 survives episode 4, he will finally be willing to learn how to use a gun so he can contribute more to the team.
Too little, too late. I trust AJ to make his own decision, so he shoots 10 dead so Violet or Louis can survive. Later on, he shows up as a walker, and AJ can finish him off there or leave him.
Put the boy in B tier. He definitely doesn't deserve F.
Tennessee is definitely the fuck-up of the series, and that can make him pretty annoying to deal with. However, just like Ben, he's a realistic depiction of what most people would be like in the apocalypse. Most of us aren't going to be perfect little survivors like Clementine and Javier.
Speak for yourself.
Anyway, I say we stick 10 in B tier. He's a good character, but I can see how he might piss some people off. Now it's time for Clementine's 2 potential love interests. We'll start with Louis. And I gotta ask, how the fuck is this boy maintaining his dreads 8 years into the apocalypse?
Lucio from Overwatch here is the main source of entertainment for the group, telling jokes, playing music, and coming up with games to play.
Louis is more than just jokes, though. He suffers from guilt after Marlon is killed. Lou feels bad and regrets not being there to support him more.
Also, we gotta talk about how Louis ended up at Erickson. His rich dad wouldn't let him take singing lessons, since he's not allowed to be rich and happy. So Lewis took his old man's credit card and made a bunch of purchases to a fake mistress, making his mom think there was an affair afoot and caused his parents to divorce. When Louis revealed this to his dad, he threw the same words right back at him. You can be happy or rich, but not both.
Lou's father was right, though. Money and happiness don't come together.
You good, Donald?
I'm just fine. In episode 2, you have the option between saving Louis and Violet, and you should pick Louis because otherwise Bro is going to have his tongue cut out and be traumatized.
Just couldn't stop running his mouth in front of Lilly.
Louis is a good guy, as much as he jokes. He does prove himself to be capable against walkers. He does have a hard time if he kills one of Lilly's followers, though, since he'd never killed another human before. Even when his tongue gets cut out, he refuses to blame Clementine for the incident, doing his best to shake his head, signifying a no. Louis is an A-tier character, and if you're looking to hook him and Clementine up, an enjoyable romance.
On the other side of the spectrum, we have Violet, a rude and boring girl who does actually get pissy and blames Clementine if you choose to save Louis.
In Violet's defense, Violet has serious trust issues, and being captured by Delta left her vulnerable to Lily's brainwashing and Minerva as well.
Violet is also not so rude once Clementine and her start getting along. She was the loudest about keeping Clem and AJ and Erickson, even though the majority of the kids wanted them gone. Plus, Violet is the one who steps up to lead after Marlon is killed.
Let's be honest, the leader of the kids was Clementine the entire time.
That's true, but Violet still deserves credit for stepping up at all.
Also, Violet easily has one of the most messed up backstories of all the kids. Her grandmother unalived herself right next to Violet when she was a kid, and Violet just sat there watching her cartoons. That odd behavior got her sent to Erickson.
Yeah, I kind of get it depending on the cartoon. You wouldn't be able to pull me away from something like Ed, Ed, and Eddie or Courage the Cowardly Dog.
I was more of a Codename Kids Next Door guy myself.
That is an acceptable third place, Joe. Perhaps you don't have the worst taste in the world after all.
Stay on topic, fellas. Besides, we all know the original Ben 10 clears all. Anyway, if Violet ends up getting captured, she'll naturally side with Delta and attack Clementine to defend Minerva. She'll also end up getting her eyes fried when the boiler of the Delta ship explodes, but in the end, everyone forgives her, and both her and Clem will hook back up if you were pursuing her.
Violet deserves the same rank as Louis, if not higher. She's a far more interesting character and a better pick for Clementine.
Ain't no way. Violet betrayed the group and blames Clementine just because she chose to save one friend over another friend. That says a lot about how selfish Violet is.
Donald, if I decided to save Joe's life over yours, how would you feel?
I would come back and haunt you, your immediate family, and the next 7 generations minimum. I'm talking some poltergeist shit. First, I would start out small, slamming cabinets, moving furniture around, and then bam, I'm dropping heavy objects on people and possessing bodies.
Good thing I don't believe in ghosts. Violet is going in A-tier all the same. She's a well-written character, and her decisions, while a bit annoying, are completely understandable for the kind of person she is. We're done with the Erickson kids, and now we move on to James, a former whisperer who lives in the woods.
Oh no, he's hot!
Pardon me, Joe?
Bro is a freak. He goes around wearing walker skin and thinks there's legitimately a part of humanity still exists within the zombies.
I mean, can anyone prove him wrong?
Take that mask off. Let's see how much humanity all his walker friends have when they immediately start feasting upon his intestines.
James was previously part of a group and has seen his fair share of war. The horrors he saw is what drove him to adopt his pacifist nature towards walkers, choosing to spare them whenever necessary. This ideology also extends to people too. I wouldn't have a problem with it, except James tries to force his viewpoint down the throats of Clementine and especially AJ.
His ideology is for the weak, which is backed up by him getting stabbed in the neck by Lilly if you tell AJ to spare her. Dude can't go around preaching about showing mercy to people when he isn't able to recognize when someone is still a threat.
On the other hand, if you do tell AJ to kill Lilly, James will not be very happy with you. He'll actually abandon his pacifistic nature, and depending on your dialogue choices, he'll threaten Clementine if she tries to take AJ back, or he'll hold his ground in the caves they're in, while AJ, Clem, and Ten escape from the walkers.
It's confirmed that James does survive his final stand and returns to the forest, unwilling to speak with Clementine since she's made AJ a killer.
Good riddance. Have fun sleeping with walkers.
James brings a different ideology into the series with the idea that walkers still have some trace amount of their humanity. But we all know that's BS. The interesting part about James is his beliefs are mostly just a coping mechanism to deal with his PTSD. I don't agree with a word that comes out his mouth, but he's a good character all the same, B tier.
James should go in I'd rather be with the walkers because I'm convinced that's literally where he would rank himself.
Quit hating Donald. James is a good character. Put him in B tier.
On to our antagonists, starting with Abel. Apparently, Lilly's second in command of the Delta Raiders.
Lilly needs to pick another second in command because Abel is an absolute loser. Dude can lose one of his arms when Clementine pushes him into a horde of walkers, and even if he has both arms, he'll still get worked by Clementine and AJ as a grown-ass man.
It's true Abel doesn't have any W's for his short time in the series.
In their final confrontation, Abel will end up breaking his legs in a fall and be captured by the Erickson kids. Clementine can torture him for information by splashing him with water, smacking him, sicking Rosie on him, and burning him with a cigarette.
Torturing him doesn't yield much results, but then Abel will start dying from internal injuries, and suddenly this creepy bastard will start showing us the man he really is.
Turns out Abel's greatest fear is becoming a walker. He describes himself as a self-made man who got everything using his own two hands, and he doesn't want his body to be turned against him if he dies and becomes a walker.
You got two choices. Give the guy some mercy and prevent him from becoming a walker, or make him suffer his greatest fear, at which he'll call Clementine a cunt.
Whoa, Donald, what the hell?
You can't be dropping the C word like that.
I've said significantly worse. Calm down.
All right, Abel is undoubtedly an evil bastard who kidnaps kids and turns them into child soldiers. But I found his final moments to be pretty compelling. Whatever Abel became now was likely out of necessity to survive. Who knows? He might have been a good person before the apocalypse.
I'll also give the guy some points for continuing to fight until he literally isn't able to walk anymore.
Even Alvin Jr., the kid who wanted to kill Abel more than anyone else, felt bad for him in his final moments. I say we put him in D tier. Abel is a pathetic antagonist, but isn't so bad a character that he deserves F tier.
Next up, we have Minerva, Violet's ex and one of the sisters Marlon traded to Delta.
Minerva was apparently a singer for the Erickson kids, but she loses all her entertainment when she's taken to the Delta and indoctrinated to become one of their foot soldiers.
I gotta put some respect on Minerva because she's actually a warrior. Unlike Abel, Minerva is actually capable of putting hands on Clementine, and she shrugs off having a whole chunk of her face torn off by a walker.
Minerva is a broken character. She's so far gone that she willingly killed her sister Sophie when they were caught trying to escape. Even when she reunites with the kids, she chooses to stay with Delta, believing that the only safe way forward for the Erickson kids, and especially 10, is to just surrender and join the war front. She blames Clem for getting it in the kids' head that they can actually fight.
Minnie's desire to see 10 again is what drives her to push through all her injuries to encounter him and Clementine's group on the bridge. And the way she pulls up singing "Don't Be Afraid" was haunting.
Minerva, the tank will eventually meet her end when Clementine shoots her and she finally gets devoured by walkers.
Minerva deserves A tier. As far as antagonists go, she's up there with the stranger. She is genuinely threatening and capable, and her background of being brainwashed to the point that she'd kill her own sister and force her old friends into that same environment.
It's also clear that Minerva isn't exactly cold or anything. She becomes clearly agitated when people start pressing her for killing Sophie.
I'm glad she wasn't redeemed. Sometimes it's good to just let broken characters stay broken. The narrative is clear about Minerva being gone, and it's good she stayed that way.
And now we revisit an old friend. In season 1 of The Walking Dead, Lilly is either left abandoned on the road or steals the RV after she kills Carly or Doug. After many years, both in game and in real life, Lilly resurfaces as the leader of the Raiders going after the Erickson kids and serves as the primary antagonist for this season.
Looking back on Lilly in season 1, she was a hard but still capable survivor. Lilly was the one who took leadership over the motel group when no one else wanted to, making hard decisions about food rationing, which didn't make her any friends.
Things are pretty okay for Lilly until we're locked in a meat cooler and her father, Larry, has a heart attack. If you help Lilly try to revive him, she'll be cool with Lee even after Kenny drops a salt lick on his head. On the other hand, if you help Kenny, Lilly will despise you and even suspect Lee of being the one who's stealing supplies.
Regardless, Lily's sanity starts slipping from her grief and paranoia. This culminates in her killing a member of the group, and then eventually being separated from the group until we see her again in season 4.
The past 8 years have not been kind to Lilly, got her face sunken in like she's become Skeletor.
It does seem like Lilly will be redeemed, but after she cuts Louis's tongue out or brainwashes Violet, it's clear she's well and truly far gone.
In the final confrontation of episode 3, Lily's fate rides on Clementine telling AJ to shoot or spare her. If AJ shoots her, that's it. The final member of the motel group besides Clementine is finally gone. If you spare Lilly, she'll quickly prove her surrender, and begging for mercy was nothing more than an act, and she'll kill James.
Lilly got some mixed reception, I feel, seeing how she went from a tough but kind leader to an outright warmonger. But you got to remember there were 8 years between season 1 and 4. No doubt Lilly had to go through a lot to reach this point.
I got respect for Lilly for once again being an actually threatening antagonist. Unlike Abel, she does legitimately have Clementine beat more than twice throughout the season, and would have won if not for the last dregs of her kindness or interference from other people.
If Lilly does live, she'll have one last talk with Clementine as she's getting away on a raft. The two of them holding each other at arrow point. The lesson Lilly delivers here is that nothing lasts. She knows her community will fall and she'll be alone again. And she tells Clementine not to let her new home at Erickson drag her down.
I always liked Lilly more in season 1 than Kenny. Her character seemed more consistent and was less reliant on Lee passing a series of checks to determine whether or not she'd be loyal to you. It makes sense she'd hate you if you killed her dad, as opposed to Kenny being against you when you've helped him in 5 other situations.
As a villain, Lilly is still easily one of the best. Her motivations are clear and compelling. She's a dreaded menace who commands a lot of respect. But you can still see some of the person she used to be within her, making her development here more believable.
Lilly is an S-tier character for sure. She was already up there with season 1, but this further cemented it and could be considered the best villain of the series.
Big agree, and now we're on to our final 2 characters. First, we have Alvin Jr., the baby that Rebecca has all the way back in season 2. After being separated from Clementine, he spends some of his earlier life at the McCarroll Ranch until it is attacked by raiders. Clementine saves him, and the two of them go it alone on the road for a few years.
When we first meet AJ, he's, well, a baby. So there's not really too much to say about him during his time in season 2. However, in the flashbacks of season 3, we see he had a close bond with Clementine. It's heavily implied AJ's first words were Clem.
In season 4, the goofball and Clementine are traveling on the road alone until they get in a car accident and are rescued by the Erickson kids. The interactions here tell us a lot about AJ. This is apparently the first time he's been around other people, and he doesn't like being approached from behind, given how hard he bit Ruby.
Lil Bro definitely has his mom's temper.
AJ is a unique character, one of the only characters we've seen that knows nothing of the world before walkers.
You merely adopted the Walker era. AJ was born in it, molded by it.
That's not even a joke either. AJ is supposed to be 5 years old, but the boy is built like he's 8 and has no issue using a gun. He's arguably a better survivor than a lot of the adults from season 1.
AJ is definitely more competent than Ben was.
It's true that AJ is strong for a kid, but he's still a kid, and his lack of experience and morality causes him to say and do some very questionable things. He shoots Marlon dead at the end of episode 1 when he had fully surrendered and was no longer capable of hurting anyone. Depending on what you tell AJ as Clementine, this will either send him down a path of atonement or he'll slide further down the path of violence.
And AJ's issues with people approaching him from behind and his questionable moral compass are from the trauma he experienced during the McCarroll Ranch raid. He was covered in someone's blood before Clementine even got to him. And on top of that, his caretaker, a woman named Helen, attacked Clem and naturally had to be taken out. All of this occurred just as AJ was developing consciousness.
One of the more compelling moments for AJ is when he states that he wants to personally kill Abel. But it's because he's seriously afraid of the guy and wants to overcome that fear.
Yet AJ will be uncomfortable seeing Abel in the state he's in during his interrogation. Seeing him completely beaten and broken removes any satisfaction killing him would have had. AJ is wavering between good and bad throughout the entire season, especially when he's faced with James, someone who tries to keep AJ from going down the path of a killer.
This culminates in episode 3. After a long battle, AJ finally has Lilly at gunpoint. He has James on one shoulder begging him to spare Lilly, and oddly enough, Tennessee is on the other shoulder urging AJ to shoot her dead.
If AJ doesn't shoot Lilly, she will get up and murder James right in front of him, and if he does shoot her, he'll kill her with one shot, and then keep shooting until he's emptied the gun. AJ will then begin to argue with Clementine because he can't tell what's right and wrong, and he finally recognizes that Clem doesn't really know either. So AJ asks to be allowed to make his own decisions from now on.
This is a pretty risky proposition. AJ is 5 years old. He really shouldn't be able to make such choices.
AJ might be 5, but let's be honest, he's a survivor. and is going to need to be able to do things without waiting on Clementine or anyone to tell him what the deal is.
As it goes, if you don't put your trust in AJ, he will refuse to stop Tennessee from going to Minerva by shooting him. This results in either Violet or Lewis being eaten by walkers instead. If you do trust AJ, he'll shoot 10, sparing the romance options.
AJ's logic here was that 10 was going to get yet another person killed, and he believed it was the right choice to just let 10 go with his dead family if he really wanted it, and I think AJ made the right choice.
Debatable. We basically just taught AJ it's okay to execute someone if they're presenting a threat to the group.
Stop being dumb as a brick and you won't get shot. Simple as that.
The last hurdle for AJ is dealing with something we all feared would happen. Clementine gets bit by a walker, and AJ is faced with the decision Clem faced with Lee all those years ago, to either finish her off or let her become a walker.
This was a heart-wrenching moment, not just because Clementine is bit, but because we finally see this kid break down as you'd expect from a little kid. Clementine is the only family he's ever known, and losing her here is destroying him.
It's obvious that Telltale wanted us to connect with AJ like we did with Clementine. The effort is there, but it missed the mark for me. Having said that, AJ is an excellent character. For years, we waited to see why we should care about this kid after he was born. AJ is S tier, what I wouldn't give to see a continuation of his story with or without Clementine.
From seeing AJ be born, to following Clementine's journey after she lost him, to seeing them finally reunite. It was all an amazing payoff. S tier character for sure.
Comparing AJ to Clementine in individual seasons, he honestly does clear her. He's a far more interesting kid than season 1 and 2 Clem. He has some really good comedic moments too. Love seeing the kid just start jamming to music during the party at the school.
And with that, we finally reach the penultimate character of this series, the very face of it, Clementine.
When we meet Clem, it's at the very beginning of the apocalypse, and put plainly, she's just a little girl. There isn't really any reason to care about her beyond the fact that she's a kid and isn't as annoying as Duck.
As season 1 goes on, almost in sync, both Lee and the player begin to care about Clem. I'll never forget my heart pounding when I was trying to stop her from eating Mark's legs.
Clementine has a profound impact on me as a player. There are many questionable decisions I would make if Clementine weren't there acting as my moral compass. I spare Danny St. John and go against taking from the stranger's car because Clementine is there watching me and doesn't approve.
Eventually, it'll be decided that we can't just let Clementine be a little kid forever. And Lee teaches her how to protect herself by cutting her hair, teaching her to shoot, and letting her partake in the planning as an equal member of the team.
However, Clementine is ultimately still a kid. And this leads her into making one of the most devastating mistakes in the series. She leaves the group and goes to the stranger, believing that he can take her to her parents. This results in Lee getting bit, losing the boat, and the separation of the entire team we have in Savannah as they try to rescue Clem.
When you rescue Clem, she does finally reunite with her parents, as walkers, unfortunately. And then she's faced with the reality that Lee is going to turn as well.
It's up to Lee to determine what Clementine does from here. Should she either kill Lee now or leave him to become a walker?
You should kill Lee. Shooting him is a vital part of Clementine's character journey. If she can't shoot Lee here, then she won't be able to off anyone the next time someone gets bit.
It is still a hard thing to ask of a 9-year-old girl, which is why it's tempting to spare Clementine that one thing.
In season 2, Clementine travels with Krista and Omid for a while, but a series of events lead her toward the cabin group, and it's clear that Clementine isn't so happy-go-lucky anymore.
For real, the majority of this season, Clementine looks like she's become apathetic to reality way before people normally do it when they're in their mid-20s.
You sound like you're speaking from experience, Donald.
Someone is, but it's not me.
Can you really blame Clementine, though? Between everyone in the cabin group relying on her to do everything, and simultaneously all of them dying one after another right in front of her, Clem probably isn't doing well upstairs.
It's easy to write season 2 Clementine off as a bland character, but I believe she's really just going through the motions day after day, not knowing why she's continuing to walk, but just doing so. That is until Alvin Jr. is born. This 11-year-old girl is a natural because she immediately takes after the kid without being asked.
At the end of season 2, Clementine is faced with many choices, but all of them eventually result in her being alone with Alvin Jr. until she joins the new frontier in season 3. It's there that we learn just how much she's grown to care for the kid.
Clementine lost her place in the Richmond community stealing supplies for AJ, and when they're separated, Clem eventually concludes that he must be dead from sickness, and she becomes a hardened individual. Season 3, Clem takes no BS. Hell. When she's introduced, she drops a tree onto a truck and then holds Javier at gunpoint.
This was definitely where Clementine became a true survivor. She's been out on her own, only stopping between communities when needed.
You can see Clementine's experiences starting to shape who she is by this point, most notably in the way she steps in during the fight between Javier and David. She's no longer the scared little girl who watched Kenny and Jane fight helplessly. Clementine is quick to break up the fight between the brothers before anyone dies.
By the end of Season 3, Clementine sets off from the new frontier on a warpath to reunite with Alvin Jr., which she successfully does in between the events of Season 3 and 4, having rescued him from a raid attempt on the McCarroll Ranch.
In Season 4, we see Clementine regain a bit of her cheery demeanor, no longer depressed or just angry, just happy to finally be with AJ. But the truth is, she's still looking for one last thing, a location she can settle down in so she can finally stop running.
The Erickson school is just that location. When Marlon is killed, it's true that Violet is the one who leads, but Clementine is the one who gets the kids prepared to fight against the Delta Raiders. Clementine Spear heads the operation to rescue the kids that were taken. The little girl who didn't like shooting a gun or cutting her hair became one hell of a leader and guardian at 16 years old.
And for someone so young, Clementine faced her potential death with bravery. When she was bit, she handled things as calmly as Lee did, first securing AJ's safety and then giving him the option to either leave her to turn or stop her from turning.
As sad as that scene made me, it never really hit the same way Lee did.
I think that's because we all knew deep down that Telltale wouldn't have the balls to really kill Clem off.
By cutting off Clem's leg, AJ was able to save Clementine from turning. Whether you think what occurred there made any sense is a discussion for another day.
In the end of it all, Clementine lived out the rest of her days at the Erickson School for Troubled Youth. Yep, that's it. Nothing else happened after Season 4 concluded.
So I take it we're not going to talk about it then?
I think anyone who's still an active part of the Telltale's Walking Dead game community knows exactly what is being alluded to here.
Setting aside events best left ignored, it goes without saying that Clementine is going up there with Kenny and Lee.
Obviously, but I think some could argue that Clementine isn't exactly the best written character in the series, and that this ranking is based on some obvious bias, since we all basically raised this girl.
However, Clementine is the face of this series, certainly more so than Javier or even Lee himself. Even when Telltale's story demonstrated some of its worst and least interesting writing, everyone came back to see just how Clementine's story would finally end. I think that in itself makes her a top character.
Plus, Clementine's development from a helpless little girl that would have probably died in her treehouse all those years ago into a hardened, badass survivor is one of the best growths in gaming.
That about does it for us here. We'll see you folks.
Does anyone else hear that?
It kind of sounds like growling. And a lot of it, it's getting close, real fucking close.
Oh no, this is not good.
It's walkers. Move, move, move.